Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think we have learned a lot. I think we come to these symposiums to really sort of learn more about what is happening in the world of AI. And we always come with this big expectation of today, I'm going to get my answer of what I need to do. Unfortunately, I'm not here to give that to you. So I would like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Belinda, and I'm the Director of Education at Wingu Academy. But I also have the privilege of teaching at the University of Witwatersrand at the School of Education. So it gives me a quite nice position to be in, and also to talk about AI and what we see happening. So I think for us, it is not so much about whether we are going to use AI or not use AI anymore. I don't think that is why we are here anymore. We are now on the bus and we are now going through with this whole thing, and we need to make the best of what we have. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the use of AI, but the responsible use of AI. Now, we have talked about ethical issues, and that is not off the table, but I also want to expand your view on what responsible AI use actually is. And I want to start the conversation. I'm not going to produce you with an answer. Oh, thanks. I'm not going to produce you with an answer. I want us to start a conversation where we can help each other understand and help each other to apply it in different contexts. So each one of us brings a different context where you are applying or using AI. And I think it is not to say you must do this or you must do that. There's nothing like that, right? It's in your context, how you're going to use it and how you're applying it. But I think, and I really hope that at the end of the symposium, we can sort of get onto a WhatsApp group or a community, so we can start some sort of a community of practice where we can share ideas. And I think that was also a request from one of the questions, that we start sharing what we are doing, so we don't go through the same struggles and waste a lot of time where maybe it's already resolved. So when we think about using AI responsibly, AI, but doing it responsibly, you can see on my slide there, I'm talking more in the context of online teaching and assessment, but I want you to also bring it back to your classroom. So if it's a brick and mortar classroom, think about it like that. If it is an online space, think about it like that. Independent or distance education, think about it like that. So although I will be talking in this context, you can also bring it into your context as well. So when we think about the use of AI currently, and actually with any tool for that matter, but in this context, we're going to talk about AI. So if we think about the student in classroom A, right? The student there is opening an assignment, reading a question, typing it into ChatGPT, copy the answer, pasting it into the assignment space and submitting it, right? Maybe 2 minutes max, okay? And then we look at the student in classroom B. Got an assignment, also copied and pasted the question, but then she starts talking to the chat. And she says, okay, you say this, but my textbooks say that. What about this? And we are comparing answers, we are refining it, and in the end, copying and pasting the answer and submitting it. So in which classroom did you think learning actually happened? Obviously B, right? And that is where we want to move to. That is how we want to have our students use AI. Now, and we'll get to that point as well. This is very much to do with how we design what we're going to do in the classroom, whether it is in a brick and mortar school or whether it is online. So I want us to think a little bit about not about whether AI is used, but whether it's used responsibly. How is it used? How do you show your students to use it? How do you allow your students to use it? And what I like about this disruption of AI is it really takes us out of our comfort zone. It really makes us think, why are we here? Are we here to mark assignments? do administration, submit the marks, you fail, you pass. Why are we here, right? And it shakes us to our core to say, what am I going to do now? And that is where we have to rethink not just the use of AI responsibly, but us as teachers. What is our core purpose? And it's come through the whole symposium for the day as well. So when we talk about what responsible use of AI is, we obviously talk about academic integrity, how to avoid plagiarism, policy compliance, but that is not enough anymore, right? That is not enough. We can't just go on that. So with that, we have to expand our view or our understanding of what responsible AI use is. So I want to propose a little bit of a different definition and as a starting point, again, not as an answer. So responsible use is not about what students submit, right? It's not about what they submit. It's about what the students think while they learn, while they create that submission that they're going to submit in the end, okay? And even if no rules are broken, let's say they didn't plagiarize, they didn't do anything wrong. If AI is replacing thinking and learning, it is not responsible AI use. Okay, so that is very important to remember. It's not just about ticking the boxes. It's not about your plagiarism score is below this. You've referenced well, you've done this. Has there been any learning happening? And that is the core thing that we need to think about and rethink. So in online environments, this even becomes more critical because in your brick and mortar class, you can see if people are looking around, playing with this one, not doing the work. In the end, you will see PT hasn't submitted his task, so he's obviously lagging behind, disengaged. Well, online teaching, students will submit. They will be in your class, present, pressing emojis. They are there, they are engaging, right? That's what they like to do. So on the surface, they are there, they're engaging, they're submitting their work, but how do we know if learning actually happened, right? We can't say anymore. Then that makes it very difficult. And when we do interviews for teachers at Wingu Academy, my main question always is, how do you think teaching differs in the classroom versus the online classroom? It's not just being able to share your screen. It's not just being able to make sure you do an impactful lesson in 20 or 30 minutes. It's really to get to know that your students are truly engaged in class. And that is very tricky. And I don't have the answer, but that is the most difficult thing you can do. In the class, you can throw them with something, right? But online, you can't do that. So we do not always see the learning process, right? That's also true for the online, for brick and mortar schools, not always. We can't see the learning process, but it is a little bit easier. And we see submissions. We see the tasks are complete. The progression bar is complete, 100%, but we don't see thinking. We don't see how did they get to that point. And especially if you are a little bit new to AI, you will just think the student, what a brilliant student, 100%. Rubric was perfect. They did everything, and it's a brilliant student. So AI increases the risk of what I can call is invisible disengagement. That's very difficult. It's a very difficult thing to detect. It's a very difficult thing to address in the online classes. So students, they appear productive, but they are not cognitively engaged. Whereas in the brick and mortar school, you can see they are not productive, so obviously they are not cognitively engaged. And it's not always that simple, I understand, but it is a little bit more easier when you have the student right in front of you. So in a recent study, a systematic review, they used about 67 different studies with regards to the use of ChatGPT and the impact of that use. And they classified it between structured use and unstructured use. Okay, so that is like, I think Mr. Walter said, intentional use and unintentional use, very similar to that. And they found that in structured use, where you really sit and plan how you're going to use this tool, not just as a tick box to say, yes, I have ICT integrated in my classes. That's not the point, right? So if you use AI structured, they did see thinking is increased. But they also saw when there's unstructured use, just for them to maybe generate some summaries, there's no thinking happening, which is obvious. Okay, that is an obvious result. So obviously structured use enhances thinking, and unstructured use can really reduce it. So there are obviously two ways in which we can use AI, and I think in a lot of the presentations that this also came through, is that you can use it as a tool, like any other ICT tool, just to, like I said, tick the box, which is really then really wasting your time, rather than just leave that tool alone. Or then think about using the tool. In this case, talking about AI, use the tool in the classroom where it can really become the student's thinking partner. A dialogue can happen between the student and the chat or the chatbot or the agent. And the student is then in a role where they can question the outputs, right? And this is very difficult because remember, you and I already expect your student to think on a higher level. We think about Bloom's, where you critique answers, where you evaluate things. You are putting the student in that level, 4, 5, 6 level of Bloom's, right? Not what is the definition of, right? So it's very important to think how you want to use AI. AI cannot be used for the lower order Bloom's. It's not to create a definition that they can read in the textbook, that they can look up themselves. But the thinking happens is when you start using it, Bloom's 4, 5, 6, right? So that already gives you an idea of, okay, wait, I'm not going to use it in my first lesson on balancing equations. I'm going to use it in my third or fourth lesson, because that is when the students are a little bit better prepared for that. All right. And that also expects from the teacher to have played with it, to have an idea what they want to do with the tool, not just to use it. And that also brings a responsibility to the teacher, much more, even so, as to the student. The student will just use it for whatever reason, but you can tell the student how and when to use it. And that's also where the AI guidelines comes in, and maybe it will come up later as well. But I think there was a lot of speakers that talk about that as well. If the guidelines are clear, this is for this task, you may not use AI. For this task, you use AI for question 2 only. Or for this task, you can use AI, but in the following way. The students are much more likely to follow those rules. You will see that with tasks where you explicitly say you may not use AI, most of them won't use it, because they know for this one they are not allowed to use it. If you told them to use it and you told them explicitly how to use it, they will follow those steps and they will do that. All right. So it's really, and that is why to have an AI policy, great. To have your AI guidelines, not just for the students, but also for the teachers, super important, super important. It's not just to say, yes, I have a policy or a guideline. It's really making it worthwhile using it in your class, because otherwise it will just be a gray area. The students will just use it the way they want to, and you will always try to catch them out. You've used AI, you haven't. And that's not the game that we need to play. We need to focus on how learning is happening. Okay, that was just a sideline on the guidelines. Okay, so technological tool and a pedagogical tool. Like I said, it's clear that this would be for the lower Bloom's, and those for, if you're going to use it as a pedagogical tool, it's going to be for the higher Bloom's level. So really think about where you want to use it. I'm not saying don't use it for the low order. Let them play with it or make the class interesting with it. Let them play a game. But in the end, where you want thinking and learning to happen, it obviously is going to be at the higher orders. Okay, so with unstructured environments, it's obviously a very dangerous space to play with AI in. So that is where students learn to stop analyzing things. They know they can just get their answers. They stop questioning the answers. You know, in the beginning, when you use AI, you will sort of read it and see what it says. Does it make sense? But now, maybe, I'm not saying all of us is doing it, but I'm just saying now you are sort of finding a trust, pasting the answer, copying without reading it properly. You'll scan through it, maybe if there's numbers or whatever, but you're not really analyzing and critiquing it anymore that well. And that is what the students will also do. And they will start accepting the answers at just what it gives, right? So stop analyzing it. So this is an illusion of learning. And again, this is not just a problem for the teacher. It's a big problem for the students as well, because now they got a 90 for their task, right? The task, the teacher set the task to say, if you could get your 80s here, you will be ready for the exam. And they got a 90. So they are super ready for this exam, right? That's what is happening online. If the students use AI for their formative assessments, not all of their formative assessments are always done under exam conditions. So let's say you do use the Vigilator app. Not all of their formative assessments are done like that. So they start getting the illusion that they are sharp. Coming the exam, they get a 20%. Parents are up in arms. Students are up in arms. What happened? Nobody can say, because the student got 90, now they got 20. Same questions was even asked the same. Nobody can explain it, but this is exactly what it is. There's an illusion that comes through with this, that the students are then thinking they are prepared. So, and that's another dilemma, or I would almost say like a tension that comes in with assessment in not just online, but AI-saturated environments. We prepare our students to go in and sit and write their grade 12 exams, right? What do? We have classes online, we have assessments online, everything is online. So how do we prepare them for learning in this environment, but writing in this environment, right? So, and we can talk, that's a whole different talk. But the thing is, we need to start thinking and collaborating about how we're going to do that. Because the core line is not necessarily to memorize things, right? The students need to know a definition, and yes, there will be questions on writing down the definition, but the idea is they need to understand what this thing is, that's the definition. Then they need to understand what this thing do, and then they need to understand what can I do now with this thing, and that is where the skills building come in. So AI can help you with step 1 and with step 2, but they have to still build those skills, and those are the skills that they have to take with them to the exam room and write. Then the definition, memorizing the definition is not going to be such a big problem, because they already know, they already evaluated, critiqued, and created some stuff. So there's no way they won't remember what this thing is, right? And that is where the teacher's responsibility comes in. Think about your own classroom. You are hammering those definitions, right? Start your slides with a definition. Instead of giving them a problem, let them solve it and sort of find the definition themselves. When they do that, they will never forget that definition ever again. They've already studied for that question in the exam. So it's really rethinking about how we do our teaching. We can't do it like we've done it up until now. We can't do it anymore. So it does shake us a little bit to think, what now? Okay, but that said, it doesn't mean that you're not going to throw your 20 years or 30 or 40 or 50 years of knowledge out of the window, because that is really, really important to bring with you and to build on top of that. So the study goes on and it talks about creativity. We've had a session on creativity before. They saw even in unstructured settings, creativity did pick up, but the critical thinking was still going down, because even though the students came up with nice ideas, new ideas, they couldn't take the idea and evaluate it and put it into a product that really made sense. So in the end, when you use AI in unstructured, it is really, it's not working for the students. There's no learning happening. Critical thinking is reduced. So then it brings us to a critical shift in online education, but also in education in general. AI does not just challenge our assessment. And assessment, I'm not just talking about the test. Any task, formative assessment, summative assessment, anything you want to use for learning. It challenges our ability to see thinking. So if you give a student a quiz, multiple choice, and multiple choice can be a really good tool to learn, but the normal traditional multiple choice, fill in the word, blah, 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 do this, something that lower order, right? The student can produce. They can fill it in, they can get full marks, and they can produce sometimes high quality outputs with very minimal cognitive engagement, right? So responsible AI cannot be about restricting the tools. We can't say, okay, you've cheated now, I'm taking it out. We can't say that. That's not why we are here. We must think about design learning environments where thinking becomes visible. Now that is difficult because how do you see how your students think? Now there are different tools and I'll show you a little bit. I'll just talk a little bit. I'm not going to go into the tools. But before we get there, and I promise I will just do this one theoretical slide, just to give you a little bit of a bigger picture of how we need to think about using AI and tools in general. And I want to start on the right-hand side, where that is our ultimate goal, right? Student achievement. We want our students to achieve. We want them to be employable. We want them to have the skills that we promise them that they will have by the end of grade 12. So that is our responsibility. But to have that, we need to make the most of the time that we have with them. Effective instructional time, right? After 8 hours of school in the classroom, what can we tell? What have they learned? And sometimes my daughter, she's 15, turning 16, coming at home saying, when I ask her, what did she learn? Nothing. Of course, you didn't learn nothing, but hopefully that's not true. But that's the thing. They spend time in the classroom, but how do we know they've actually learned something? We wait until the report card comes, right? Well done, you've learned something. Is that really true? We can't say. So effective instructional time, a talk for another day. Then to have effective instructional time, we have to have active learning that occurs. Active learning must happen in the time that you have the student in front of you. And how do you know active learning occurs is when you have active engagement. Now, active engagement can be a lot of different, there's a lot of different domains, a lot of different tools you can use to do that. But without active engagement, this whole thing falls apart, right? And that is where I want to sort of not close my speech yet, but that's what I want to focus on. How do we get our students to be actively engaged? Brick and mortar, online, doesn't matter, different tools, different platforms, but the same issue, right? So active engagement is the first step. So that is when the students get into your class, you stand, and today we're going to learn about photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is when sun shines, and do you think they're going to be actively engaged? Definitely not, right? So it is heavily dependent on the design and learning style of the student. So how do you design your classroom? How do you design what you're starting off with? How do you make them want to learn more? And that also is why I added the intrinsic motivation. That is the start. Even before you start talking about a topic, if they see photosynthesis come up, you haven't even said anything about it, but they're not really interested. They don't have intrinsic motivation. Doesn't matter how you present the class, they might never have that intrinsic motivation to study that topic. So it's really, it's a very complex thing to get students to start being engaged. But once you have that, and that you can really do with your design. And I know it's a lot of work, but like I always tell, and like I explained as well, I teach student teachers at the School of Education. We don't say go home and now redesign your whole curriculum. We say for one topic, one class, do one thing different. Keep it, save it. Next term or next year, when you teach about that, you do another. If you've taught for 30 years from now on, you'll have your whole curriculum done. And it's not going to take you to stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning. Just start small. And very important that goes with that, don't just start and now that's done. See if it worked, otherwise it's not going. So you can rather work on that one topic for a couple of years and get that refined instead of now I'm going to do all my quizzes are going to look like this now. And you start from day one all the way through. Now nothing is working, so all your quizzes are not working. Do one thing at a time, small bits, and try and test. Remember, like any technological tool, it is developing, it is changing. And we always try to stay abreast of what we need to know. Choose a tool that you feel comfortable with and master it. Use it. It's just another tool. AI is just another tool. We can't ignore it. So that should probably be part of your toolkit that you're going to explore and learn about more. But it is not something that is out of your reach. Okay. So yeah, so I think this framework is something that I am constantly using, doing research in different contexts and different stages and different either in developing and assessment. So it's really I feel like a grounding theory concept that works well. So just a few practical checkpoints that you might want to use or want to think about is when you design for cognitive engagement. It's not just about completing the task. This means you want to ask students to justify, and there I agree with Prof. Sort of way, let's make school 2 hours longer. I agree, it's a lot of work, but maybe we can do an hour longer, or let's make the classes 5 minutes shorter and have that extra hour for this type of thing. Where we get our students to justify it, that's we have brought back the Viva. So for our PhD students, they have to present and defend their work, which I feel really is important because, and even, I can't remember who said it, but have presentations in between so that you can see the progress of the student. And that also builds confidence. If you, for instance, have done a task with AI alone, you're going to write a test, you yourself feel not confident, right? Especially if you haven't done an effort and read and critiqued and know what you said there, you feel not confident. And that's what the students also come with. So now you force them to become confident in various phases in their thesis or in their research. So even though they will use AI, that's fine, but you are closing that loop every now and again. It's like, okay, great research. Explain that to me, and we will have different people coming in. Now we're going to go in a new panel, a little bit more, and so on. And in that way, even if they practice with AI, it's great. Let them practice with AI. If they can answer the questions that the panel that we trust in is asking them, they are where they are supposed to be at that point. But that obviously starts with us teaching them how to critique, how to defend their reasoning, and using AI or chat to do that is very important. The second one is, like I said, in online environments, thinking is often hidden. So here I said, okay, now how do we make thinking visible? And that is also not just in online settings. I don't know if any one of you have maybe looked at or know about Project Zero. It is a site from Harvard University. Nice, a lot of resources that you can use. You can adapt it, you can combine it, you can do it for online, offline. They have the whole story, what you would use if you're introducing a topic, if you're consolidating a topic, if you work in small groups, big groups, individual. So please go and look at that. On the slide, that picture is a link, so you can just, if you receive the slides, you can just click there and go and explore a little bit. Try some of it and see, maybe some of it works, some of it doesn't work. It starts from simple things like when you introduce a topic, let the students just write a mind map. They take a picture, submit it. They keep their mind map, and through the class, they make notes as they go. And at the end of the class, end of the topic, end of the week, they take a picture again and submit that. From there, you can see how the thinking has evolved. They can do it in groups. They can have debates about it. And it's just really nice to see, to have a glimpse. It's just a glimpse on how they are thinking. And it does give you some perspective of what works and what doesn't work. The third one is about positioning AI as a dialogical partner. And that is what we've said all along. But a lot of online schools, as Wingu as well, started to bring in these chatbots where the answers, the bot is programmed not to give the answer, but it is prompted to test the student's knowledge. So the student will, for instance, say, what is this answer? And then the bot will say, okay, what do you think does this mean? So it almost works its way through analyzing the question. And obviously your students will say, no, please just give me the answer. The bot will say, I'm not allowed to give you the answer, but let's break it up in smaller bits. So what about this? Can you answer this question? And it guides it through. So in a way, the students, obviously in the beginning, they really like to play with the bot. It's a new tool, so it dies down a little bit after a while, but it does give them that opportunity to have that dialogue with the chatbot and get some concepts resolved, right? And you can make it about the misconceptions later in the task, later in the topic, or early in the topic, doesn't matter. It depends on what you program your bot to do. So very nice initiative. It works very well, but you have to keep it fresh. Just a tip there. And then in the process, AI literacy, very important. We want AI to be our cognitive tool. Okay, we don't just want to be something that we outsource our thinking to, writing our answers. So students must develop that literacy by learning to question the outputs. So you can't just also now tell them, remember to question your outputs and critique the answers, because you can't just copy and paste. How do they do that, right? And an excellent example with creative writing, I'm in STEM, but first time creative writing makes sense, right? So very nice example. And that is the things that we need to start sharing with each other, because that's a practical thing you can do in class. So we really need to start sharing the ideas, things that work, things that didn't work. Like I said, bots work well for the beginning because it's new. Then you have to do something else. So the kids get bored, but they do play with it quite a long time. They're still playing with it, so it's still okay-ish, but I can see the stats are a little bit dying down. Okay, so yeah, so that's just a few practical points, and we can talk a lot about that. And it takes us back to our classroom, where we think about what do we want to have in our classrooms, right? We want our students to be able to think, but we can't just expect them to think on level 4, 5, 6 if we haven't ourselves been doing that, right? So you will see, yeah, maybe you can do a self-evaluation. Go back to your own task for maybe term 1 or your plan task for term 2, and just go and check how deep is the learning that you are expecting from your students. Is it more definition-wise, complete this, do this, or do you at some point really ask them to evaluate and create, and not just create because the SBA say we must create, as a whole, that you build up throughout. Yeah, so AI response, or responsible use for AI, not about controlling the tool. It's about designing environments where thinking cannot be avoided. And I think that is the most important take home I want to say here. Use AI however you want to use it, but make sure you create an environment where you cannot have the student and yourself avoid thinking, because then it becomes a replacement. That's it.